In 1848, the first Women's Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York, to discuss new civil, social, and religious ideals for women. This was the spark that encouraged numerous social advances for women during this time. Birth control was a unique social advance for women that challenged the Comstock Act of 1873, which declared the transportation of birth control illegal. The birth control movement granted women sexual freedoms and led them to demand greater liberty, free sexual expression, and reproductive choices. During this time, the abortion rate decreased and people became more educated about sex and their bodies. This movement has an especially important impact on those living in poverty because the more kids they had, the more mouths they likely had to feed, sending them into a greater poverty.
During the Progressive Era, women fought for better working conditions, higher wages, and shorter hours. Harriet Stanton Blatch worked with the Women's Trade Union League to advocate for better labor reforms. After the 19th Amendment passed, conditions got better and more women began to work. Rising up, 20th century. This was the start of women's suffrage. With the protests, now we got the 19. Just some women who are fighting for their rights. So many times we need better conditions. We work in terrible places. We have a dream that we'll have better wages. We must fight to obtain equality. This is women's suffrage, it's the fight for our rights. We are making changes in our economics. Now we got President Wilson endorsing our rights, and it all starts at Seneca Falls. Women's suffrage.
Out in the heat, Alice Paul gave her speeches. The WCTU fought for prohibition and making children have better lives.
This is women's suffrage, it's the fight for our rights. We are making changes in our economics. Now we got President Wilson endorsing our rights, and it all starts at Seneca Falls. Women's suffrage.
Rising up, straight to the top. Women are now a part of politics. Birth control movement not gonna stop. Individual expression is now nationwide.
This is women's suffrage, it's the fight for our rights. We are making changes in our economics. Now we got President Wilson endorsing our rights, and it all starts at Seneca Falls. Women's suffrage.
There were many key players during the 1920s, and most of them were vital in getting women the right to vote. One of the most well-known suffragists to date goes by the name of Susan B. Anthony. It is said that Anthony was a devoted abolitionist and believed that African American men and women should have the same voting rights as white men and women. In 1856, she even joined the Anti-Slavery Society and traveled across New York giving abolitionist lectures. However, to further her personal cause, Anthony and many other suffragists protested passing the 14th and 15th Amendment. Susan B. Anthony was very devoted to the cause of women's suffrage for various reasons and was involved in the progression and creation of many unions for this cause. She believed male drunkenness was harmful to innocent women and children and believed women should be able to vote so they could vote for prohibition. In 1890, Susan B. Anthony was the National American Women's Suffrage Association's second president. Alice Paul was the leader of the most militant wing of the women's suffrage movement and was well known for organization of various protests. While she was in graduate school, Alice Paul learned how to use unladylike tactics to draw attention to herself. She brought these tactics to her movement and her speeches and was able to gain mass media attention. On March 3, 1913, Paul and her colleagues coordinated an enormous suffrage parade to coincide with and distract from President Wilson's inauguration.
During the women's suffrage movement, many unions were created to fight for different causes. In 1903, the National Women's Trade League was founded in Boston, Massachusetts during the Progressive Era by Margaret Dyer Robbins. Women of the working and middle class were involved in this group and fought for higher wages and better working conditions. The group also wanted to be involved with the American Federation of Labor to get these changes made. The group had many accomplishments, such as investigating the Triangle Factory Fire of 1911, which led to new safety measures in factories, banning child labor, achieving an 8-hour workday for women, and allowing women to have minimum wage. Eleanor Roosevelt was a key player in this union because she got the group involved with politicians, allowing the group to voice their opinion to the government. The Women's Christian Temperance Union was founded in 1874 by Annie Wittenmeyer in Cleveland, Ohio. The goal of the group was the prohibition of alcohol because of its bad effect on families and society. The WCTU became a part of the Women's Crusade, which was other unions in other states and came together to fight for different causes, such as integrating kindergartens and school systems, banning child labor, and international peace. The accomplishments of this group were that they got higher education for women and children, merged with organizations to help immigrants with Americanization, and taught English and culture classes to immigrants. The National Women's Party was formed by Alice Paul in 1916, and the goal was to get women the right to vote. They had marches, nonviolent protests to fight for this cause, but unfortunately people attacked protesters to try and get them to stop. All the fighting was worth it in 1920 with the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which allowed women to vote.